Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa. Parivrajaka Charja Asto Tarasata Shri Shri Mati Divine Grace Abhai Charana Ravinda Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya. Save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa. Parivrajaka Charja Asto Tarasata Shri Shri Mati Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki. Premjaka Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Hari Gaura Bhakti Ki. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopanath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki. Braj Bhumi Shri Vrindama Dama Ki. Navdip Mayapur Dama Ki. Purushottam Chetra Jagannathpuri Dama Ki. Ganga Mai Ki. Jamuna Mai Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Tulasi Maharani Ki. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki. Jai Nitai Gopremanandi. All glorious to the devotees. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Garanga. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. So we're reading from text 12, I think. Yep, looks like it. It's getting harder to turn my neck. Ugh. One of the joys of getting older, right? Everything gets stiff. Yatra Dvija Gavo. Yatra Dvija Gavo. Yatra Dvija Gavo. Veda Vanashrama Kriya. Veda Vanashrama Kriya. Veda Vanashrama Kriya. Yatra Dvija Gavo. Veda Vanashrama Kriya. Tang Janapadam Yata. Tang Janapadam Yata. Tang Janapadam Yata. Sandipayata Vishyata. Sandipayata Vishyata. Sandipayata Vishyata. Tang Janapadam Yata. Sandipayata Vishyata. Yatra Dvijagavo. Veda Vanashrama Priya. Tang Janapadam Yata. Sandipayata Vishyata. Yatra Dvijagavo. Veda Vanashrama Kriya. Tang Janapadam Yata. Sandipayata Vishyata. Vaishnavis, Yatra yatra, wherever. Dvija, the brahmanas. Kava, the protected cows. Veda, the Vedic culture. Varnashrama, of the Aryan civilization, of 4 Varnas and 4 ashramas. Kriya, the activities. Tam tam, that. Janapadam, to the city or town. Yata, go. Sandipayata, set fire. Vrishchata, cut down all the trees. Translation: immediately go wherever there is good protection for the cows and brahmanas, and wherever the Vedas are studied in terms of the Varnashram principles. Set fire to those places and cut from the roots the trees there, which are the source of life. Responsively, immediately go wherever there is good protection for the cows and brahmanas, and wherever the Vedas are studied in terms of the Varnashram principles. Set fire to those places and cut from the roots the trees there, which are the source of life. So this is really interesting how Hiranyakashipu, he's really, he wants to stamp out this culture. He's looking at the very essence of Vedic culture, which is the protection of cows and the Brahminical culture. Because as we know, Prabhupada explains many times how from the cows come life, basically. So many foods we can procure from milk products. I remember when we used to. It's interesting. Samba was here yesterday. He used to be the temple president when the Punjabi Bug temple was in a small house, and the deities Radhika Raman were in a converted garage. And so we used to stay there quite regularly. I don't stay there so much now because it's a bigger place than that. But I used to stay there quite regularly. And just not far, like maybe 2 blocks from the temple, there was this Bengali sweet shop. And you go to this Bengali sweet shop, and there's just this big glass front counter, and there's maybe 150 different types of sweets there, all made from milk. And they're all completely different. Everyone had a unique flavor, unique taste. And just to give you an idea of how many different things can be produced from milk. And milk is a very nutritious food. Like Prabhupada, when his disciples sometimes were looking poorly, he'd encourage them to eat sandesh. He said, because sandesh has a lot of protein in it. This is very, very healthy. Of course, if we overdo it, just like with anything, if we overdo it, then it's not good for our health. But there's so many nutritious foods that can come from milk, but also the cow itself, because the cow produces milk, but also the cow, produces manure. Manure is very good for the land. It gives all sorts of healthy. I can't remember all the different names, but there's because there's a lot of like half-digested grass in the manure. When it's added to the soil, it gives a lot of humus, which then encourages different microbes and all that sort of stuff to thrive in the soil. So very good for the soil. And we see in the Vedic age how it talks about how the pasturing grounds are always moist because the fatty milk bags of the cows, they were always leaking milk onto the ground. The reason they were doing this is because the cows were happy. And if you look at the way it's explained in the Vedic scriptures, then the combination of the cow and the bull, the cow should produce milk from which so many foods are come, but the bull, he would also pull the plow. So you're able to till the soil and grow so many grains and vegetables and things like that. So all in all, the cows are very, very essential for healthy life, for prosperous life. And the symbol of prosperity is the cow. So when we look after the cow, and also because the cow is very dear to Krishna, we see that of all the different pastimes that Krishna performs, of all the different ways he descends in this world, his most favorite way, or the time, the pastime he enjoys the most, is when he descends as Gopal. Gopal's the friend of the cows. So he descends as a cowherd boy and he takes care of the cows and he just loves pasturing. You see, like in his early years in Vrindavan, he and his friends were looking after the calves from the age from about 4 till 8 or 7.5 or something like that. They're taking care of the calves, and then because there's a festival called Gopastami, and Gopastami happened twice in Krishna's Lila. First time, Gopastami is the day when Krishna first goes out into the pasturing grounds with the calves or the cows. So the first time was when he was around 4 years old, maybe a little bit older than that, and he and his friends were going out for the first time to care for the calves. And then several years later, again on Gopastami Day, they graduated to looking after the cows. So it's very, very integral to Krishna's pastimes is this caring of the calves and the cows. And you see in the you read in the Krishna book and other books which are describing the life in Vraja, and it's very much the whole lifestyle is focused around the cows, and they see that their only prosperity comes from the cows. They see that actually their life is sustained by the cows, and this is the life that Krishna enjoys the most when he takes this role or assumes this pastime of a cowherd boy in Vrindavan and caring for the cows. And you'll see that many of the writings, many of the books we study and many of the writings of the acharyas are focusing on this period of Krishna's life when he's in Vrindavan. And this is the most attractive period. And then also it's mentioning here in this verse about the Brahmanas. So the Brahmanas also play quite a substantial role in Vedic culture. As we see here, is mentioned Varnashrama in the purport, and then the transliteration is of the Aryan civilization of 4 Varnas and 4 ashramas. So the Varnas are Grihastha, Kshatriya, Brahmana, or Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and these are compared to being like the different limbs or parts of the body of the Lord. So the Brahmanas are compared to be like the head of not of the Lord, of the social structure. So the Brahmanas are compared to be like the head of the social structure, because from the Brahmanas comes knowledge, comes guidance, comes good qualities, comes intelligence. That this is the role the Brahmana is meant to play in society. A Brahmana should be well versed in Vedic texts, and we see in the Vedic texts are talking very much about quality, about standard behavior, about how we should function in society. Then we have the Kshatriya. The Kshatriya is compared to be like the arms, the strong arms, and just like we use our arms if you're under attack, you use your arms to protect yourself. So the Kshatriyas protect the other Varnas, they protect the society. And then you have the Vaishyas. The Vaishyas are mercantile, productive. They engage in things like banking, cow protection, and various types of business for the welfare of society. And essentially, all the productivity of society would come from the Vaishyas. So everything you would eat, all the produce you would use for building the things you'd use for building houses, everything would come from the Vaishya class. And then the Shudras, their role was simply service to others. And you can read, particularly later on, in I think it's the last 3 or 4 chapters of the 7th canto, Narad Muni is giving quite a vivid description to Yudhisthira Maharaj about the different varnas and the ashrams and the roles they're supposed to take in society. But from that description, you can see how important this social structure is. Because what's going on in the current day and age, varnashram is practically non-existent, although you do see some natural divisions within the society. You do see people who are, Brahmanically inclined, even though they don't understand what a brahmana is, but they are somewhat Brahmanically inclined in that they have a disposition towards knowledge. They have a disposition towards trying to understand the truth. But they don't understand the finer qualities that go along with being a brahmana, such as mentioned in the Gita, there's samadhamma taposacham chantiraja mevijam jnanam vijnanamyastikam brahma kama sabhavajam. There's this equanimity or equanimity, how they're equally disposed to all different persons. Regardless of their background, they're equal to them. And it mentions that in the, what's that verse in the Gita? Gava hasti, what's that? Sunichai Vasapakecha Pandita Samadashana, you know the verse, man? Oh yeah, Vidyavan, thank you. Vidyavanaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi hasti, Sunichai Vasapakecha Pandita Samadashana. But someone who has this equal vision, and this is where soul in the heart of all living entities. Therefore, see them equally, because they see there's no difference in essence between the potency of the jiva that's residing in my heart and residing in your heart. Same. Or an animal, like we have the alpacas out here. Jiva is in their heart also. It's the same quality. And there's no difference. It's just the external body. So, a brahmana, there's a nice verse in the Veda. It says, Om tad Vishnu paramam para pashanti suraya divi vachaksharatam tad vipraso vipravajang samindate Vishnu yat paramam param. That just as the wise and learned Brahmanas, they're able to see the abode of the Supreme Lord. They actually understand what is Krishna's abode, and they can perceive it. And because they can see it, they're able to reveal that to others. It's just like, if, for instance, someone might be trying to understand about this microphone. Many years ago, I worked in the audio industry, so I know, I don't even need to look inside this. I can tell you exactly what's inside of here, how it's all connected, etc., like that. I understand the way it functions. So I can explain to someone else, because I understand the science of how this thing works, how it functions. So it's the same with the Brahmana, is because the Brahmana understands the spiritual nature. Because a Brahmana is one who knows Brahman. It's not someone who has a thread or has received a mantra. A Brahmana is someone who understands Brahman. Brahman meaning not the impersonal Brahman, but the Para-Brahman. And of course, there are different levels of Brahmanas. There are Brahmanas whose realization is at the level of Brahmajyoti. And as we know in the Bhagavatam, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdjate. It talks about the three different levels of realization. So there's one who has the Brahman realization, who's looking at the all-pervading Brahman effulgence of the Lord. That's pervading the universe, the whole creation. That's one level of realization. And then there's the Paramatma realization. In the heart of every single living entity, in the heart of every atom, there is the Paramatma, the personality of Godhead, is residing as a localized super soul within the heart of all jivas. That's another level of realization. But as the Bhagavatam points out, these levels of realization are inferior, they're lesser, they're incomplete, because they don't see the source. It's just like, we can see the sun, the sunshine is coming into the room. So some might think that, the light of the sun, that's the sun. But that's one aspect of the sun. And you see the sun planet in the sky, and they might think, that's the sun. But that's another aspect of the sun. But then there's the personality, Surya, of the sun planet. That's the personal aspect. So sometimes the acharyas, they use this as a a comparison to help us to understand the difference between the nature of these different manifestations of Krishna's energy, the Brahman effulgence, the Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of God himself. So we see that there's different realizations, and as there are different realizations, there are brahmanas who are on these different levels of realization. So there's the brahmana who is simply understanding the Brahman effulgence, and so Tattvamasi, you are that, or what's the other one? Sarva Kalvidam Brahma, yeah, that it's all one, it's all Brahman, which is true, but there is distinction. It's just like you go out in the forest, you walk around the road here, and you see trees. Oh, they're all trees. That's true, they're all trees, but there is different types of trees. There's I don't know what sort of trees you have here, but in Australia, you have, I don't know, 50 or 60 different types of gum trees. They're all gum trees, but you've got spotty bark, you've got paper bark, you've got all spotty gum, paper bark. There's blue gums, there's red gums, there's all different types, but they're all gum trees. But they're all different, and you'll see, for instance, there's one gum tree called an ironbark, right? Or very, very hard wood. And there's another. I remember when I was young, I used to do a little bit of carpentry, and there's one that's called a blood gum, and the wood is so hard. I remember one time I was banging a nail into the wood, and the wood was so hard the nail actually turned around and came back out. So as I'm banging in, I'm seeing the nail coming out. The wood was so hard. But then you get another one, like a blue gum. It's really good for building. The woods, when it dries, it sort of stays straight. It doesn't crack. Whereas other types of trees, like you'll see in India, for instance, they chop down coconut palms, and they use that for building things. But it only lasts 2 or 3 years before it falls apart. So you can see that everything has its quality, and the qualities vary according to the nature of the thing. So in the same, you can say that, yes, everything is Brahman, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, but it's not that it's all the same. It all has different features. And as I was explaining with the example of the sun, is the sunlight, it gives light, it gives warmth. So that's the nature of the sun. Whereas the sun planet, it has different features from the sunlight. And the sun person, the sun god, the person in the sun, he also has different qualities. He's a person, you can have a relationship with him, you can have conversation with him. So you can see also within the different stages of, or the different manifestations of God's potencies, there are different qualities. And so everything in this world has different qualities. And according to the qualities, we interact. Whereas someone who's on this Brahman level of realization, they just think it's all one. And therefore they interact with everything that they try to. They don't actually succeed, but they try to see that it as all being one. But they are still attracted by the objects of the senses. And according to the different objects of the senses, they're attracted to these items, and they act in different ways. But someone who's actually understanding the real person who can be, how can we say it, devoid of attraction or not discriminating, like in a I can't really clearly express the point I'm trying to get across here. Because you'll see that, like, even people when they're on, say, for instance, a Brahman realization, where they're essentially trying to say that Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, it's all Brahman, therefore it's all one, it's all the same. But they discriminate because they don't actually, deep down, they don't believe that. Even though they're expounding that philosophy, they don't really perceive it, they don't really practice it in full because it's an impossible thing to practice, to see everything as the same. Whereas you see someone who's on the stage of God realization, they understand that everything is ultimately coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they see the various manifestations. They see the differences between these different manifestations. Therefore, they act accordingly. It's just like, Prabhupada, Prana, Hoksha and myself were having a conversation outside last night. And it's just like, even though within this manifestation we see that, this Pandita Samadashana, how the advanced person sees that every living entity, every creature is ultimately a manifestation of the Supreme Personality of God. Still, we don't act with every living entity the same. I'll give you an example. You may go up and embrace a child or a friend or a loved one or something like that, but would you go and embrace a tiger? It's the same. And this is where this Tattvamasi, that you are that, this is where this falls apart. Or Sarvakalvidam Brahma, this is where it falls apart, because they don't actually, they don't really see things as being the same, because otherwise they treat them the same. Or like, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. In Australia, some people call Australia the lucky country. And so one person I met interpreted the reason Australia is the lucky country is because of the 25 most venomous snakes in the world, we've got 22. The place where I live in Australia, there's one particular snake. It's a little short, stubby snake about this long, really fat, really angry snakes. They're called death adders. And so the place was called Death Adder Valley because there's so many death adders. And they're really slow-moving snakes. But when they strike, they're so fast you can't, even if you record it with a video camera, you can't see them strike. They're so fast. And actually what they're doing is they strike several times what looks like once. And you slow the video down to about half speed, you can actually see they hit several times. They're very, very fast. So you wouldn't go out and embrace one of those, because it'll be the end of your life. So even though they practice this kind of view that it's all one, in reality they don't. They espouse this view, but they don't see it as one. So anyhow, that's just the different types of brahmanas there. But the one who's actually a brahmana understands Brahman. He sees that the Brahman means the Supreme Personality of God. So they're able to see the abode of the Lord. And therefore, because they understand what it is, they can reveal it to others. And that's the point. Is someone, it's just like we were also talking last night about, if you listen to Prabhupada lectures like 25, 35 minutes. Sometimes they might go up to an hour. But you'll see how much content Prabhupada packs into that short class. Huge amount of content. And also, the thing is like, you listen to a Prabhupada lecture and you get so much understanding. Why? Because he understands the topic very deeply. And therefore, he's able to explain it to you in a very simple way. It's just like I was saying, like say for instance, something with this microphone. Someone who understands how this works really well can explain it to you in a very simple way, and you'll understand. But if someone doesn't understand it so well, and they pull it apart and they try to explain how it's got this and how it's got that, you'll think, well, I don't really understand what you're talking about. So often you'll find that if you don't understand what someone's explaining to you, it's generally because they don't have a good understanding of the topic. But if someone understands the topic very well, then they're able to explain it to you in a way that you can also understand it. So this is the position of a brahmana, is they understand who the Supreme Personality of God is. They understand what our relationship with the Supreme Personality of God is. Therefore, they can explain it to us in a way we can understand. The picture of proper human civilization is indirectly described here. So we see that Hiranyakashipu is talking about Brahminical culture and protection of cows. This is human civilization. Anything else is less than human civilization. And we see in Vedic culture, the Brahmanas were protected, but the cows were also protected. You never hear of slaughterhouses and things like that. They just didn't happen. There's no such thing. In a perfect human civilization, there must be a class of men fully trained as perfect brahmanas. And this is so essential. If we do not understand the absolute truth, how can we save ourselves? How can we save others? How can we give people God consciousness if we don't understand the absolute truth. Similarly, there must be Kshatriyas to rule the country very nicely according to the injunctions of the Shastras, and there must be Vaishyas who can protect the cows. The word Gava indicates that the cows should be given protection because the Vedic civilization is lost. Because the Vedic civilization is lost, cows are not protected, but instead indiscriminately killed in slaughterhouses. Such are the acts of demons. So Prabhupada is comparing what's going on here to, because they're demons, but he's comparing it to what's going on in this day and age, where you see that not just cows, but all animals are killed indiscriminately. I remember reading a statistic years ago. It was probably going back 25 years ago. So it may have increased now, I don't know. But each day in the United States of America, 12 million living entities are killed every single day, just for the satisfaction of the tongue. Cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, whatever. They're killed. 12 million. That's a lot. That means, like, if you look at the human population of Australia, in 2 days you kill the whole population of Australia. I'm not sure what the population is here, but in Australia, the population of Australia is about 25 million. And Prabhupada said here, such are the acts of demons, because they take defenseless living entities and kill them. It's just like, a parent kills their child. You have a young child, 3, 4 years old. They're defenseless. What can they do to protect themselves? And you kill them. So when a human kills another human, there's usually quite strong repercussions. But you can go out and kill as many. Like I remember that when I was younger, I met this guy who used to go hunting rabbits in South Australia, but he'd do it with a machine gun because he could kill lots of them at once. Just indiscriminately killing for the pleasure, the buzz he was getting from firing guns and killing living entities. Didn't eat them or anything. I just killed them and left them to die. So that's just indiscriminate. This is the act of demons, is to kill living entities like that. Therefore, this is a act of civilization. Varnashram Dham mentioned here is essentially for human civilization. Unless there is a Brahmana to guide, a Kshatriya to rule perfectly, and a perfect Vaishya to produce food and protect the cows, how will people live peacefully? It is impossible. And that's what we see is going on now, is where can you find peace in the world? Everywhere you go in the world, there is so much anxiety, there's so much disturbance, there's just like, everyone now is experiencing the price of everything is just going up and up and up and up. And everyone's in anxiety about it. Because it's like they just don't know how they're going to make ends meet. They don't know how they're going to live. And that's just a product of a demoniac civilization. And with this as the background of what's going on in this material world, how is it possible to be peaceful? It's only when one lives, especially the agrarian lifestyle, where the cows are protected and you just live a simple lifestyle. You grow food, and you deepen your understanding of Krishna consciousness and try your best to spread that Krishna consciousness, that you can actually become peaceful in this world. Trying to endeavor constantly to improve or to increase our technological dominance, where we've got so many, high-tech devices, and we've got, this and that, and, fast cars and fast computers and fancy phones, etc., etc. That just leads to anxiety. And people just want to have this, these things more. And it's kind of interesting, with a lot of this technology, the prices always, seems to be coming down quite regularly, but the price of the essential, and these things aren't essential, I mean, who is it that can't live without a phone? You might think you can't live without a phone, but it's quite easy. It's because I remember going back like maybe 15, 20 years. I never had a phone, never even thought about it. It just wasn't on my radar that I needed to have. We didn't even have a landline. I lived perfectly fine without it. But then now we've got these gadgets, it's like, you've got to have them, You see people, they walk around with them in their hands, they're just like, someone's going to call me, they develop this like dependency on this device. And it's just a symptom of how lonely they are in this material world. And so, this artificial dependency has been developed. And like some of these companies are so expert in promoting their product, is they create these products that you don't need, and then they convince you need them. And people become so dependent upon these products. But you'll see there are things that you are completely dependent upon, such as food. Who can live without food? But the emphasis in the society is not given to these basic necessities of life: food, shelter. Like in Australia right now, there's a housing affordability crisis because the governments their policies haven't been focusing on ensuring there's enough affordable housing. And so what we're finding, and you'll see the same in big cities here, that the number of people living on the streets is increasing more and more. Just like where Murli lives in London, there's at least half a dozen people on that block just living on the streets, and they're forced to live a very, very degraded life. They're eating, they're sleeping. They don't have bathrooms. They don't have anything like that. So just everything they do on the street, right there in front of you. And it's just the way the world's going. And a lot of this gets down to that there's no leader, there's no Kshatriya who knows how to perfectly manage society. Therefore, things are becoming very, very mixed up. Another point is that trees also should be given protection. During its lifetime, a tree should not be cut for industrial enterprises. In Kali Yuga, trees are indiscriminately and unnecessarily cut for industry. It's just like, I was in Spain a while ago, maybe 3 weeks back now, and Spain essentially is a desert. There's hardly any trees wherever you go. But it used to be, I was speaking with Yadunandan Maharaj, and they have a saying in Spain that a squirrel could go from the northeast corner of the country down to the south of the country without ever touching the ground, because the country was covered in oak trees. But when they built the Spanish Armada, they cut most of those trees down. For this demoniac, to try and conquer England. We know the history there. But it was just because the king at that time had some grudge against the king or the queen or whoever it was in England, and decided that he was going to conquer the country. And there's the result. He's just turned the country essentially into a wasteland. And this is what we see that's happening all over the world, how countries are becoming essentially turned into a dust bowl because of these demoniac endeavors. And it's going to get worse and worse. Trees are indiscriminately and unnecessarily cut for industry, in particular for paper mills that manufacture a profuse quantity of paper for the publication of demoniac propaganda, nonsensical literature, huge quantities of newspapers, and many other paper products. This is a sign of demoniac civilization. The cutting of trees is prohibited unless necessary for the service of Lord Vishnu. Yagnata kamanonyatra lokoyang karmabandhana. Work done as a sacrifice of Vishnu must be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. And we see this, I used to live in a place in Australia where there was just like pine trees everywhere, and it was all just for paper mills, thousands and thousands of acres of pine trees. And when they grow pine trees, because pine trees aren't native to Australia, so when they grow the pine trees, it actually makes the soil unsuitable for the native flora and fauna. So it's really messing up the environment there. And they're just doing it for, as Prabhupada says, for this demoniac propaganda. Like you read these newspapers, look at the stuff they're promoting, or these novels that people write, and it's just all useless stuff. And it's all just focusing on making money, how they can make money. So pretty crazy society. But if the paper mills stop producing paper, one may argue, how can our ISKCON literature be published? The answer is that paper mills should manufacture paper only for the publication of ISKCON literature, because ISKCON literature is published for the service of Lord Vishnu. This literature clarifies our relationship with Lord Vishnu, and therefore the publication of ISKCON literature is the performance of yagya. Yagnata kamaronyata loko yang kamabandhana. Yagya must be performed as indicated by the superior authorities. The cutting of trees simply to manufacture paper for the publication of unwanted literature is the greatest sinful act. So the thing is, like this whole society, they don't understand this, but this whole society is focused on sinful activities. Everything they're doing is simply for the satisfaction of the senses. But as Prabhupada's pointing out here, it says yagya loko. Yagya should be done for the sacrifice, for the satisfaction of Krishna or Vishnu or Yagya. He's called Yagya also. So the purpose of all our activities should be simply for the satisfaction of the Lord. If it's not, if we're doing some activity for the satisfaction of ourselves, then actually this is sinful activity. And this is where the society is going wrong, is that everything they're doing is for the satisfaction of the self. Everything they're doing is to gratify their senses or their extended senses, meaning family, friends, society, etc. But the purpose of all our activities is meant to be to satisfy Krishna. And this is actually a godly society. And it's really interesting here. We see how, like you read this section here, preceding verses and the coming verses, you'll see how Hiranyakashipu, he was very conversant with Vedic culture. He understood that the cows and the brahmanas were, the nurturing of the cows and brahmanas was essential to Vedic culture. He understood, the role of all these things. He understood, the structure of society and how the Kshatriyas had to, rule guided by the brahmanas, how the Vaishyas were taking care of the cows, the role of the Sudras, etc. He understood all these things. And he understood that the purpose of society was to please Vishnu. But the thing, and it's kind of a little bit confusing in one sense, because, well, if he understands all these things, why is he trying to kill Vishnu? Because the thing is, like, years ago, I was listening to this lecture series by Sri Dayananda Maharaj, and he was talking about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And you see in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he's talking about various aspects of the Vedic culture, but without trying to convince people of these, you're not the body and things like that. Whereas you look at the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, Krishna is convincing Arjuna, you're not the body, you're a spirit soul, etc. And therefore you should act in this capacity. So Sri Dayananda Maharaj was making the point that in the Yoga Sutras, because these kind of concepts were just part of everyday life, therefore Patanjali is presenting his yoga to people who understand these concepts of you're not the body, your spirit soul, the mind, the material mind acts like this, the way to control the material mind is like, all this kind of stuff. So it's just, this is the background. So here also we see that, Hiranyakashipu, he's just attacking these things that are understood by everyone in society to be the backbone of society, Brahminical culture, cow protection, all this sort of stuff. So the Vedic culture was quite prevalent, and you'll see, as he goes on in the subsequent verses, he starts talking about how you're not the body, your spirit soul inside the body. The body, the living entity transmigrates from one body, it goes through all these different transmigrations. It's just understood that this is the reality. But his disqualification is that he wanted to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He didn't accept that Vishnu was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And even though he understood Vedic culture to some extent, he didn't see the difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and himself. He thought he was just a powerful person. And he was also a powerful person. He was thinking, okay, by my endeavors, I'll overcome this powerful person. I'll kill him. I'll cut off his head, was what he was saying. But he didn't understand that the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, as the Ishvara Paramakrishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadi Radi Govinda Sarva Karuna Karanam, that he's the cause of all causes, he's the origin of all origins. He didn't see this, he didn't understand this, he just thought that Vishnu was the same as me. Maybe a little bit more powerful, but I'll kill him. Don't worry, I'll kill him. So, even though he understood the culture, even though he had this founding in Vedic knowledge, just like you see with Ravana and his brother, not his brother, sorry, his son. What's his son's name? No, Indrajit. Indrajit was performing Vedic sacrifices. So they understood the culture, they lived the culture, but they didn't really understand the essence of the culture was the service of the Supreme Personality of God, and they didn't understand this concept of this as Lord Chaitanya points out, Jivera Sarupa Hoy Krishnera Nityadas, Krishnera Tatasta Shakti Beda Bed Prakash. They understood they weren't the body, that they got. And we see that even people like Socrates understood he wasn't the body. But this is the beginning of self-realization. It's not the end. It's the beginning, Prabhupada points out when he's discussing Socrates. So they had that foundation in the Vedic knowledge, but they didn't actually have the fruit of this knowledge. The fruit meaning understanding that they were not the body, that they're Krishna's eternal servant. They had half. So like, what's that? Ada Kukuti Nyaya, the logic of half a hen. They understood the first part, that eggs come out the back. I want the eggs, so I'll cut the, but I don't want to feed the thing because it costs me too much, so I'll cut off the head. That's their logic. It's called Ada Kukuti Nyaya. It's the logic of half a hen. I don't want to feed it. I just want the eggs, so I'll cut off the head. So that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to separate Vishnu from culture, from the Vedic culture, but he can't do it. It's not possible. Anyway. Any comments, questions? Yes, Ataksha Prabhu.
I suppose I understood when someone's Brahman realized they can see that everything is made up like you have that Lego and you have different shapes that are made out of the Lego, so you can discriminate that that's that looks like a hand, someone that looks like a hand. So they can discriminate.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
You can see that there's Brahman is made into different things, so they see that the building block of wherever the objects are is the same. It's like when you have a Lego, you make different things from the block itself. Just depends how it's arranged.
Yeah, but for them, these different forms are just temporary, and ultimately we're all one. And their idea is to merge into that oneness. But there's a really interesting book by Bhaktivinoda Thakur called the Tattva Viveka, and he defeats this concept of oneness in a very simple way, because he's saying that if ultimately we're all one, then when one person achieves their emancipation or liberation, then we should all simultaneously achieve that emancipation because we're all one. So the fact that one person gets realization, one person doesn't get realization, indicates that we're not all one. Because if we're all one, we'd all achieve liberation at the same time because we're all one. So even you don't even have to go to the point of philosophy, because it's just illogical. There's no logic to it. Whereas you look at if you take the time to understand the Vedic Siddhanta, you'll see not only is it philosophically sound, it's also quite logical. It just makes sense, the way it's explained in the Vedic texts. But then, when Shankaracharya, as we understand, Shankaracharya had a mission to fulfill. He came down and he presented the Vedic texts in a bit of a different sort of a way for a particular purpose. But essentially, it's almost like you could say it's a demoniac philosophy, because it denies the existence of God.
And also, Prabhupada's mentioning in the backlog that there's different duties, the Kshatriyas, Brahmins. So it would seem the Brahmin has the quality of you could say, well, it was just a shooter, but Prabhupada was saying that they tried to make it a cashless society in Russia and make everyone a shooter. And you can't do it because some people will know how to make money, some will be more fearless,
Yeah.
and some will be thinker.
So it's failed. The whole thing, the whole experiment failed.
So we tried to say in ISKCON, well, we're just going to go from shooters down to Brahmins. That doesn't really make sense because there will be, it won't work, the Brahmin won't work. If you just go ahead, you'll need people that are
Yeah.
fearless and prepared to stand up. So they, if they were just being submissive and forgiving all the time, it wouldn't work.
Yes and no, because the nature of a Vaishnava is to be forgiving. And while we may have the service of being a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, still we're Vaishnavas. So the nature of a Vaishnava is to be forgiving. But it's just like, you know, if you look at the role of a parent, similar kind of concept. The parent obviously has to discipline the child for the child's benefit. And we can see this in Krishna's pastimes, how Yasodhi Mayu, she was disciplining Krishna, but she was disciplining Krishna not because she was a brutal person and she wanted to, you know, beat him with a stick or something, but she understood, if I don't discipline him, he won't grow up to be a nice boy. You know? So the parent does that. But the underlying principle of the parent is love. You know? But in this day and age, that's just messed up like anything. You know, and you see what people do to their children. It's just you know, it's beyond animal behavior. It's just like barbaric what they're doing. You know? So everything is because there's no culture, because there's no rule of law, everything is lost. But as Vaishnavas, even though we may have these different roles, you know, okay, so we may be a temple manager, for instance. So temple manager has to administer. Temple management has to sometimes point out to devotees things they're doing wrong. But that we can never forget we're dealing with Vaishnavas. Never forget that. Even though you have this position of being a temple manager, never forget that these are Vaishnavas, and Vaishnavas are dear, whatever level they may be at. Sometimes we see that people rationale, oh yeah, but they're not Vaishnavas because this, that, and the other. No, we don't have that qualification, or we don't have that adhikar where we can say this person's not a Vaishnava. They're chanting Hare Krishna, they're serving Krishna, we accept their Vaishnavas. Leave that discrimination to the Lord. He can make that discrimination, we can't. Our role, you know, in whatever service we have to function according to that role. But we should always remember that we're dealing with Vaishnavas, and Vaishnavas are dear to the Lord. Sometimes Vaishnavas are compared to the lotus feet of the Lord, and offending Vaishnavas is like sticking pins into the feet of the Lord. And what will happen when you stick pins into Krishna's feet? He'll withdraw his feet. And so even though we may have to discipline, even though we may have to correct, etc., never forget that, who we're dealing with. But it's the same as like when we're dealing with a living entity, even though we may have to sometimes say things which they may not like, we still need to understand, Jivera Sarupa Hoy Krishna Dāsa. These living entities, even though they don't understand it, they're servants of Krishna. So whatever role we have, especially as Vaishnavas, or whatever service we're given, we need to always keep this firmly in our mind, that these are servants of Krishna. And I always have to have that respect. We never give up the respect. Even, you know, and it's difficult because sometimes when we're dealing with people, they just do things that just like, oh my God, you know, it's just infuriating sometimes. You know? It's just like, anyway, I mean, you know the sort of stuff I'm talking about. But you can't, you know, if you lose that respect, if you lose that understanding of who it is we're dealing with, then you kind of lose the qualification to be able to deal with it, you know, to take that position. And it's just like last night, I think Sambhava Prabhu was mentioning, he was quoting something from Manu Samhita about, you know, the guru, the father, huh? Yeah. So this same concept is given there in the beginning of the 5th canto by Rishabdev, Guru Nasha, that unless you're capable of delivering independence from the cycle of repeated birth and death, you should never take this role, a leadership role or a guru role. So it's just like when you take the role of a parent, your ultimate duty is to try to bring them to Krishna consciousness, to try to show them the path back to Godhead. It's the same when you take on the role of a guru. It's the same when you take on the role of a king. It's the same if you take on the role of a temple president. Your duty is to guide those people on the path back to Godhead. And if you can't do that, then really you shouldn't take that role. You don't really have that qualification. So, okay, maybe we're not at that point yet, but we need to understand this is where I need to be. I need to be in this position where, excuse me, where I can guide these people on the path back to Godhead. So any position of responsibility you take in life, it's serious responsibility. It's not just like, I'm the guy who calls the shots, and you do what I say. That's not what it's about. It's not about control. It's not about domination. It's about inspiring them in the process of God consciousness so that they actually want to go back to Godhead. So any position of responsibility, big responsibility. Position of leadership, big responsibility. And we see what has happened in our society and in broader society. When people take on these roles, when they lack the qualification, what happens? It's havoc. They wreak havoc on society. I mean, like you look at when a guru takes hundreds or thousands of disciples and the guru falls down, the effect of that wreaks havoc on the society. And the people just lose faith. They lose faith in the process of Krishna consciousness. Not just their guru, they lose faith in the process of Krishna consciousness. So, quite devastating. Prabhu?
In a society of Vaishnavas, how to engage those who got a Kshatriya tendency other than...
Who got what?
Kshatriya tendency other than administration. How to engage those devotees who got this Kshatriya tendency.
Yeah, you'll see like in Kali Yuga that all these tendencies are mixed. You won't. It's very rare. I don't think I've ever seen someone who's like purely Brahminical or purely has a Kshatriya tendency. So it can be challenging because like oftentimes you'll see devotees are doing services which they're not suited to. And you find that when you can find what works for them best, then they can flourish in that situation. And that's the I guess the art of being a good manager is try to understand what is a person's nature and how to connect that with Krishna. Because it is a conditioned nature. We're all conditioned. So what is that conditioned nature and how to engage that conditioned nature excuse me, in such a way that they can flourish in Krishna consciousness. And someone may have particular tendencies, like you mentioned, Kshatriya tendencies. So, they can be involved in management roles or just supervising things or whatever. But of course, we have to, because oftentimes, like you look at someone who has so-called Kshatriya tendencies, and oftentimes they're just control freaks. They don't really have Kshatriya tendencies at all. They just want to dominate people, and someone who has Kshatriya tendencies, it has a nurturing capacity, because you'll see the role of a Kshatriya is to nurture the other Varnas, to help them flourish in that Varna with a specific goal, with the goal of bringing out their Krishna consciousness, not with bringing out their materialistic tendencies. That's the goal. The whole purpose of Varnashram is to bring one closer to Krishna. That's all it's for. You engage a person according to their nature to serve God. Not you engage them in a way that makes more money for you. That's not Varnashram. That's a Surik Varnashram. It's not Daivi Varnashram. Daivi Varnashram, because Daivi, it's divine. It's connected with the divine. And the purpose of Varnashram is to bring people closer to God. So, and Kali Yuga is a very, very difficult time. So it's very hard to understand how to engage people. And the best way to engage people is simply just to engage them in hearing and chanting. I remember Burijan Prabhu telling me years ago that a good manager is one who studies the Bhagavatam all day long. Because it means you've organized things in such a way that you don't have to do any of that stuff. Someone else is doing it, and you just read the Bhagavatam. Because if it says Krishna Swadhama Bhakti, what's the verse? Is it there? This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it's descended in this age to give knowledge to those persons who are immersed in this darkness of ignorance. So if we don't understand this philosophy, how are we going to save somebody else? We have to understand this philosophy. Otherwise, how can we give Krishna consciousness to others if we don't understand what we're giving? So, good manager studies the Bhagavatam all day. That's our goal, is just to get to the point where it's just like you look at Krishna's management. It's so perfect. He doesn't get involved at all. That's the sort of management we need in ISKCON temples. It goes on so well that the leaders don't have to get involved in it so much. And now and then they do, but basically they manage from the speaker's asana. Okay, anything else at all? It's really nice to be back here, by the way. Really nice. Merle and I love it up here. It's just, such a peaceful place. Like last month we were in New York City. I don't know, has anyone here ever been to New York? Man, it's a crazy place. It's like so intense. Like New York's, where we were was in Brooklyn, and we had a room that was right above Skirmahorn Street. So Skirmahorn Street's like, the corner of Skirmahorn and Evans, and ambulances and vehicles with sirens going up all hours of the day. So noisy, and just a noisy place. And the subway goes, because basically the subway goes right down Skirmahorn Street. So what they do is they dig the street up, they put the subway tracks in, they close it back over. That's it's just under the street. So every time a train goes past, the whole building's shaking, and it's like a really intense place. And then we got back to London, and being in London was like, wow, it's so peaceful here. Yeah. And then we come up here to Scotland. It's like, wow, this is peace. You've got a really good situation here. Maybe it's a little bit too cold, but at least for me. But it's a very, very nice place. Very, very nice. And it's just a matter of just working together for the pleasure of the deities. We have to keep that as our focus. What's our focus? Is our focus, well, I need this and I need that and I want, no, the focus is not me. The focus, like I've got this YouTube channel, and I put up a text yesterday about flower garlands, and the devotees were asking who can make flower garlands, and I was giving some basic idea, and because sometimes you go to temples and it's just like they just let anyone do any service just because they want to get the job done, but that's a small part of it. Obviously, the task has to be done, but what's the essence of the task we're doing? What needs to be what we're focusing on? Any thoughts? Exactly. It needs to be directed to his pleasure. Because otherwise, if it's not pleasing Krishna, what's the point? What's the point of it? It's a useless activity if it's not focused on pleasing Krishna. And of course, we may lack certain capacities, but that's not, we might not be so skillful at doing things, but that's not really what it's about. It's about our intention. And if our intention is to please Krishna, then he's satisfied with that. Bhavagrahi Janardana. He's satisfied by our intention. So, we just try our best to work in such a way that we're always acting for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he becomes pleased and we become happy. Yasmin tusti jagat tushtat. If Krishna is satisfied, the whole universe is happy. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hare Krishna.